All right, as mentioned, then this will be the last lecture for the semester. One thing I wanted to mention to you, this is still to be determined, but as of right now, it looks as though rather than you using iwt.rankin.edu for housing your electronic portfolios, you'll put them on GitHub pages, and the reason for that is somebody hacked into iwt.rankin.edu. All right, I don't know if you heard, but Lewis and Clark College shut down this whole week and most of last week because somebody hacked their system. All right, and they found some security holes in iwt.rankin.edu, so they're figuring out if they want to try to go to a cloud solution or whatever. But for right now, I've just recommended that we just put them out on GitHub pages. All right, and then you'll have to make sure that I can reference them. So. All right, so with that said, yes?
You want us to host our website on there as well, right? The running page, or is that just for?
No, that's up to you. You can just send me that. I mean, that's nice if you do that. Yeah.
Okay.
You know, it makes it easier for me to grade. So, all right. So I am on Chapter 19, how to work with Node.js. We are going to go over all the material that's in here. This is the shortest of the last 3 chapters, and then afterwards, I sent you an email yesterday, and I took information from this. This is Brad Traversy's Node crash course, his Node Package Manager crash course, and his Express crash course. Now, with what you're going to learn today in about an hour, and it'll probably be even less than that, you're probably going to forget most of it anyway. But the point is, you'll have at least been exposed to it. And again, the class that you take in the fall semester, the 3rd semester class, which none of you in here have taken, all right, is a class that's going to talk a lot about Node. In fact, you may or may not have heard the term. I may or may not have mentioned it. But the idea of that class is it's kind of morphing into what's called a Mern Stack class. And with Mern, you use MongoDB, which is a NoSQL database, and if that doesn't make any sense to you, don't worry about it. We use E for Express, which is one of the things that we'll look at a little bit of today. R for React, which is another way to build front ends, and N for Node. So this is the Node part of it, all right? Now the big thing about Node is what Node does is it allows you to run JavaScript on the server. That's the easiest explanation to give you as far as the advantages of Node. So people who've already learned how to use JavaScript on the back end, people who've already learned how to use JavaScript on the front end, which is what you've done. All right, you've made changes to web pages, etc., where you can immediately see the change. All right, but now if you already have a decent knowledge of JavaScript on the front end, and you can take it to the back end, then you are becoming what's referred to as a full stack developer. Now, as far as full stack goes, Node is not the only way to do this. All right, but it's one of the most popular ways of doing it for the reason that I just gave you, the fact that you can use the same language on both the front end and the back end. But there are other languages that you can use as well. So as you see, we'll get an intro to Node. Well, it says how to install. You've already installed it, so that was no big thing. All right, Node is constantly being updated. So whatever version you have, there's actually a chance, even though that wasn't very long ago we did it, there could be a newer release out there. When I say newer release, you might have like 14.6.2 and 14.6.4 might be out there, for example. All right, because they make upgrades quite often. So how to use the Node command, we're not going to spend much time on that because you'll learn it and you're like, okay, that's fine. Well, why would I ever want to use that? And you probably wouldn't. All right, but we're going to look at it quickly anyway. We will take a quick look at some of the Node documentation where you'll find out about some of the modules, and that'll lead us into talking about NPM, the Node Package Manager. Again, this is a very high-level perspective that they're giving here, just so you know. All right? Now, one thing about Node is you got to kind of look at it this way. I think now it's about 12 years ago, some guy decided that, that basically what he said was, what would be cool would be if we could run JavaScript on the server. So he set out trying to do that. And when you look right in here, it says it's open source, it's cross-platform, it's a runtime environment. Yeah, all that stuff is true, all right? But what he did was he used the same engine that's used for Chrome. And that's what powers, it's called V8, like the fruit or the vegetable drink, but it's called V8, and that's the same thing that powers Node. Now, he added some C++ code over that to make it do things that it couldn't do otherwise. All right? So, again, it says they give you a few scenarios where you might want to use Node. There's a lot of places you might want to use Node. But again, one of the things I've already mentioned to you are these full stack type of applications, because you can now use JavaScript on both client end and server end, or as they're all also known, rather than client end, front end, and rather than server end, back end. All right, to make these full stack applications, and that's pretty much what they're saying in here. All right. Now the install, we've already done this. Now you've seen this already, but again, if I go out to nodejs.org, all right, I don't know which one we have in here right now. We may even have a 15 or a 14. It doesn't matter. All right. They've added some new functionality. Now, this is called the LTS, or long-term support version. This is basically it's the beta version. So they give you no guarantees if you use that version that something won't break. All right? But if you want to be able to try all the grand and glorious new type of stuff, it's in there. All right? Let's just take a look at some of the stuff that's in here. So that's the home page. All right? Here's the about. And again, they talk about things in here about asynchronous, JavaScript, etc. And this is a bunch of historical reference. Probably not something you'd be that interested in. The downloads, well, we've already looked at this. Typically what will happen is when you come in, it'll figure out what kind of machine you're using. All right, and it should be a Windows machine. I talked to Mr. Corrigan this morning, and he said, this is kind of your call, but I think you ought to let the new people know right away, especially considering it's online. No, have a Windows machine. Don't have a Linux box. Don't have a Mac, etc. Use Windows. All right, and I'd agree with that. Okay. Now, this is where a lot of the stuff is in here. This is, as it says, it's the documentation. It says there are several types on here. The first, as it says here, is the API reference documentation. When you start looking through here, you say, well, that's fine. There's not that much in here. Oh, no, there's hundreds of things in here. You just don't see them all. For instance, if I go to path, this is just the stuff that you can do for the path. If I go to file system, this is all the stuff you can do with the file system. And notice how big that is. All right? So sometimes it's not so much what you can do with Node, it's what can't you do with Node. Now, one of the things about using Node, it's designed to do a lot of stuff quickly. It's the kind of, maybe you've known people like this that kind of their attitude is, get them in, get them out. Get them in, do something, get them out. I don't want to spend a lot of time doing this. If you have different things that you do that are very CPU, central processing unit, intensive, so if you're doing tons of calculations, this is not a good package for that. All right? Because of the way that it works. All right? So you can look in there, and as I said, the rest of the stuff probably, I don't even know if I've taken a look at this stuff in here, like certification. I don't know what it is. I don't really care. All right. So the install, nothing big. You've already seen this, so if I ever want to make sure, the easiest way to do this is I can go open up anything like this, any folder like this, right mouse click, do a git bash here, and just come in here and type in node -v. And again, you can see this is the one that we all loaded that day. So it's already 16 point something, and we have 14.17.6. All right, 14 is the version. All right, and the other two, they're release and a bunch of other stuff and patches basically. when this changes, this is typically the most important, as you'd probably guess. This is typically the least important. All right? Well, the other thing is when you load Node, another thing that you get is NPM, which is the Node Package Manager, which we're going to look at in just a minute. And if I bring that in as well, you'll notice what we're running for the Node Package Manager. And like I said, we're going to look at that in just a moment. All right. So this is what they talk about. And there's, always people have this big thing. But it's like, oh, Node, it's a library. No, it's not. As it says, it's a runtime environment that allows you to execute code outside of a browser, which mainly says most of the time you're going to do it on the server. Now, notice I said most of the time. What I never showed you, and again, I'm going to show you something that's called REPL, R-E-P-L. Okay, and it's like read, evaluate, process, loop, or something like that. But I can come in here and just type in Node, and now guess what? I'm in REPL. So I can come in here and I can say let name equal Jeff. All right? All right, it says Jeff is not defined. Okay, it doesn't like that. So the way I'm doing it doesn't make sense to it. Now, why am I showing you that? Because we could do that in regular JavaScript. All right? In regular JavaScript, we could also do this, right? We could say alert, hello. All right? It doesn't understand alert. Why? Because the stuff I'm showing you right there, that stuff is client side. We're now working server side. All right? All right, we'll come back to that in just a minute. All right. So, it's read, evaluate, print, loop. I don't know if that's what I said or not, but they'll show you some examples in here. So again, you could do math. You can actually create stuff in here, etc. You can run loops. And a natural question is, why would you want to do that? When we've already got editors, etc., where we can do it. And the only answer I can give you is, again, you're doing it more on the server side than you are on the client side. You'll probably never use this REPL. All right? Most books mention it, and they'll put it in the first chapter of the book, and then you'll never see it in there again because nobody ever uses it. All right? All right. So how do you run a script? Well, this kind of is important. So let's just take a look at what's in here. So notice here we've got this. Let's take a look at everything that's in here. All right? All the stuff that's in here should make sense to you. Use strict. Okay, we know that. And in fact, typically when you use Node, use strict is basically, it's implied that it's there already. All right? But we're setting up 3 variables here. Notice they're all const variables. All right? Then we do have a let in here. All right? And we've got a for loop, and we've got this console.log. All right? Well, you know this as well as I do, that if we did this and we were doing it on the client side, I would have to go, I could create this, and I could call it futurevalue.js or index.js or whatever, but I would need, all right, I would need an HTML file, and I'd need to put that in there to include the source and then run it. Here you don't have to do that. You can run JavaScript files on their own from here. So I could get into REPL. In fact, I don't even have to be in REPL. All right? So I could just come into here. All right, not let me out. Come on, let me out. Press Control-C. There we go. So I could come in here and just say node followed by a file name, and it would run. All right? And this is the kind of thing you'd get. Why? Because that's what we told it to log out. All right, the investment amount, which they set to $10,000, the interest rate, which was set to 7.5%, the years, which was 10, and the future value. Okay? All right. And you can take a look at the stuff that's there. Okay? One thing about when you run these files, okay, notice what they have here. It says node, and then they give it the name, but they're giving it the path. If we had changed to future value, we wouldn't even need to say future value first. We could just say node index.js. When you run a file using node, the expectation is that you're running a JavaScript file. So you can say node index.js, or you can just say node index, because it defaults to a JS file. All right? Well, you know this as well as I do. Sometimes you need to pass arguments in. All right? And don't worry about what they've got here. I mean, it looks a lot more difficult than it actually is. All right? So it says set investment amount, interest rate, and years, etc. And it's passing those in here as values. They're making this much harder than it actually is to do. All right? Now, the other thing, too, is when you look here, notice we've got a couple things in here that say process.exit, which means leave the script. If you put a process.exit and you put 0 in there, that's a normal termination. If you put something other than 0 in there, it's an abnormal termination. Typically, you put in a 1. And you might even put in some kind of a console.log there that just says an error occurred or something like that. All right. So they start talking about some of these modules. I've shown you already a couple of those inside of here. We looked at the docs. All right. And you know, it doesn't matter which one. This is, we'd probably be using the long-term support. So let's just say we came in here and we knew we wanted to do something with HTTP. All right, so I would click here and boom, it would show me all the different stuff that's available for HTTP. Well, like what? Well, let's look at this one, request methods. So I click on it and boom, it's going to show me what it is. Now, it doesn't show much, but there are other places that you can go out to get more documentation. That's all fine. These are the built-in modules. These are the things that you get out of the box with Node. Does that make sense to everybody? But a lot of times that's not enough. So that's when you go out to npmjs.com. Node Package Manager, javascript.com. Not a pretty website. All right, but you literally, the last number that I heard in here is there are somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million different packages that you can grab from here. All right, and they can be something as, you know, as out there as, if I come over here and type in, let's say, Marvel Super Heroes, and notice, well, we've got some. All right. I mean, that's not typically the way you're going to use that, but the expectation is always before you go out and grab and create something on your own, you'll go out to NPM. So what NPM is, the Node Package Manager, it's an external third-party library where you can pull in modules to use. All right? So a lot of times what you're going to find is already existing in here, but this isn't an exhaustive list. All right, and it's kind of like when I was a full-time programmer, I worked in a Unix environment. All right, and Unix has got a really good help system where they've got all their commands. You know, when I got it, it was in a book about this big, but you know, today everything is online, and I get that. But the thing is, a lot of times what people did is they'd write their own commands, and if they were a good enough command, they could submit them to Unix. And if Unix liked it, they'd put them and they'd add it to the Unix commands. That's what happens here. This is pretty much an open source type of thing where you can come in and if you say, hey, man, I really wish they had a package, let's just say, I have no idea if this is in here or not, but let's just try Superman. All right, yeah, and it looks like at least there is something. Now, I don't know if this is actually the Superman or if it's something else. But the point is, if you created something and really liked it, you could submit it, and you could ask that it become part of NPM. That doesn't mean it is going to become part of it, all right, but you could do that. It was always a cool thing because where I worked, a lot of the people there knew a heck of a lot more than I did, and they would submit stuff. And then what they would do is on the page, when they put it in the documentation, they would say created by, and it'd have your name on it. All right, which was kind of a rush, I guess, for a lot of people. All right. So again, these are a couple of them. Okay. When you want to go and bring those into your program, this is how you do it. So notice we've got a thing called fs. So we come in here and we say const fs equal require fs. This name right here is just something we can make up. You usually use the same name here as its real name, but you don't have to. You could say const Ralph equals require fs. It'd be a little bit hard probably for people to understand, but you could do it. All right? And if we wanted to use HTTP in here as well, we'd say const HTTP equals require, and then you can use either double or single quotes here, HTTP. Why do you want to do that? Because again, it allows you to go and use the built-in methods with this. All right? So really, FS, file system, is a class. And read file is one of the methods under the file system class. All right? So they go through here and they give you an example of how you can read a file and write to a file. All right? I'm not going to run through that with you. Again, if you have an interest, go ahead and take a look at it. All right? Notice they've done a good job here as far as they put in error handling. Why would you want to do that? Because if you attempt to read a file that doesn't exist, you don't want the computer to hang, type of an idea. All right? The file might not exist, or you might not have access to it, etc. It says how to use the built-in file system module with promises. Well, now we're going back. If you remember, we looked at this yesterday with the dot then and the catch. All right? Again, I'm not going to run through this at all with you. All right? So, as I already mentioned, you can create and you can use your own module. All right? Now, remember, because there's different ways of doing this, and you're probably going to find this confusing, don't worry about it. But if you create your own software, all right, your own module to use, okay, then you have to take it, put it into a file, and export it, and then any file that needs it has to import it. So not only can you can export and import stuff all over the place. So as it says, to export an object, you add it to the exports property. There's different ways of exporting. I don't want to get into it right now, but there are different ways that you can export. All right? All right. Slash is the current directory. Dots, or these are both. All right, so slash is the root, so that's up at the top. Dot slash is the current directory. Dot dot slash is one up. So if I wanted to go up 3 levels, I do a dot dot slash dot dot slash dot dot, for example. All right, which again brings us into NPM. Again, Node Package Manager. A package is a module. A module is basically a bunch of code that's been put together. You can kind of, again, look at it kind of like as a class, all right, because it's got a bunch of methods that you can use to do something, all right? So here's an example. Now, again, this gets confusing. You may remember this, you may not from when we looked at GitHub pages, but I wanted to show you something, all right? And I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible. All right, so I come in here, and this is that number fun. All right, let's just pretend this is not a Node.js project, but we're going to pretend that it's a Node.js project. All right, so we'll create a brand new one. That even makes it easier. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to close this. Oops, if I can spell. Jeez Louise. All right, so I'm going to come in here and create a brand new project or a new folder, and I'll just call it, I don't know, Node EX for Node example. When you start working with Node, put everything in lowercase. Everything you work with, you're just much better off. All right, and if I wanted to put Node example and I wanted it to be 2 words, use a hyphen. All right, so I'm going to come in here, and I want to create a node project. Now, you've seen some of this already, I understand. So I'm going to come in, and I'm not even going to use code. I'm just going to open it like this. I'm going to right mouse click, and I'm going to say git bash here. All right, so I'm in there. And again, I know we looked at some of this already, but to say that it's a node project, I come in and start by saying npm node package manager init. Again, I know we looked at this already, and I hit enter. Then it's going to ask me a series of questions. By default, it uses the same name as the folder that I'm in. That's usually where you invoke it from. But if I wanted to change it, I could. I'm not going to, so I'm going to hit enter. The versioning, depending on what book you read, I look at it, this is our version. What some people put in there is the version of Node that they're using. All right, I look at it, this is my version of what I'm doing, so this is version 1. All right, okay. The description, always nice to put something like that in there. So just a cheesy node.js example. All right, the entry point, I don't have one yet. I have not created anything. Again, when you look in here, there's nothing in this folder. All right, now you'll notice that by default, that when I put that in, it says index.js, which is okay. But what many people do, since this is a server file, they say their entry point is a file called server.js, rather than calling it index. Some people leave it as index. All right, and they hit enter. This has to do with something we don't even get into in here. There's a lot of testing tools that you can build for, that you can use for this. All right, I've never used any of them. So typically we just hit enter here. If you've got a Git repository that's hooked up to this, it would automatically be filled in right here. All right, I don't even have one. You can always go back and add it later. If you have some keywords, I don't care. The author, again, you'll typically put in your name. And the license, most people instead of ISC, they put in MIT because it is a open source. And it expects it to be in capital letters. If I made the T there in the lowercase, I'd get an error. It wouldn't recognize it. So I hit enter. And this is the file that it built. And that's what it's telling me, is it built this file, and it's saying, is that okay? All right? And if I hit enter, or I can type in yes, but I'm just going to hit enter. So now, when you look in here, now I've got that file. All right? So it expects that I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to also create a new file, and that new file is going to be called server.js. All right? And I just want to show you a couple things related to this. All right? I'm not going to open back up. In fact, I will for just a second, but I just want to show you this, that, again, this is the same file that you just saw. All right? Now I'm going to come in, and I'm going to just quickly show you two different ways that you can add stuff to that file. All right? So almost always when you work on a node project, I'm going to clear the screen with clear, you want to add what's called express. We're going to look at that in just a second, but just very briefly. So I come in here and I say npm. I can do it the hard way by typing in the word install, but the shortcut is just to put in an I. All right? So I'm going to throw in a couple things in here. Don't worry about what they are. So I'm going to put in here express, and I'll put in a package called concurrently, and I'll just leave it at that. All right? So I'm going to put those in. You hit enter, okay? And what it's going to do is it's going to go out to the Node Package Manager, and it's going to download those two particular modules. Now, you may or may not have noticed it, but when I did this, when I started to do this, this file, this package.json, was 1K, and it'll stay 1K, but we didn't have that before. So as soon as you start to add modules, you get this node modules thing. All right, and if you look, that is 15 meg. That's the thing that gets really big in your project, because the more stuff you add, it has to add not only that stuff, but anything that's dependent on. So it adds a bunch of dependencies. So sometimes this file can be closer to 100 meg. All right? And there's ways to get around that. There's certain things you don't have to load, etc. Now, you also may have noticed, not only do I have a package.json, I've got a package lock.json. And that shows me all the different versions of all the stuff that I've added. I would say that literally 100 times out of 100, you should never even open this file. I just open it so you can see it, but it's called a lock file for a reason. You shouldn't be jacking around with it. Now, if I go back again to package.json and I open it up, you may or may not have noticed, but I've got this now. And it's telling me that in order for this program to run, it has to have concurrently, and it has to have express in it. All right? So why am I telling you that? Well, if right now, if I were to take this particular project, zip it, email it to each one of you, I'm not going to do that. But if I did, and you tried to run it, guess what? It wouldn't work. It wouldn't work for any of you. Because by default, these don't come along with it. So what you would have to do, so let's, again, we're going to pretend for a second here, I've sent this to each one of you. You would have to go in and bring up a window like this and just type in npm I. And that would install everything that's needed so you'd be able to run it in your program. All right? Now, the other thing I wanted to show you about that is these are called these are called, well, basically they're production dependencies. They're things the program needs in order to be able to work. There's also development dependencies. All right, and I'm just going to quickly show you one of those just so you can see the difference. So I'm going to type in npm I nodemon. And that's just something that monitors node, hence the name, while it's working. All right, so I put that in. I'm going to clear again. So why did I even show you that? Well, I want to show you if I bring back up the package.json file. Now what you'll notice is it put it in here. And guess what? I don't really want it in there. All right, what does that mean? That means that basically I screwed up. And that's actually, believe it or not, it's a good thing. Because if I don't want a package in here anymore, I do npm, you can't just say you have to say uninstall. All right, and you have to uninstall, and what do I want to uninstall? That nodemon that I just put in. And it's going to remove it then. Now it's gone, and you'll notice if I go back and look in my package.json again, that nodemon is gone. All right, so I screwed up, but actually it's a good thing because what I wanted to show you was I want to install it again, but rather than just saying I and then nodemon, all right, I'm going to put it in there as a development dependency. So I'm going to say -d. Why does that matter? Because what that means is if I go and push this project out to the internet, I don't want to push that out there too. All right, it's a development dependency, so it's only going to be used when I'm developing the project. So now I put it in as a development dependency, and doesn't look much different. All right, except when I come in here now, what you're going to notice, not there, what you're going to notice here is if I open up the package.json again, that now it's a dev dependency. All right, these are basically production type dependencies. That's a dev dependency. Now, there's more to it than this. If I want to go, let's suppose that I've got a package, all right, that I want to install. So let's just say I want to install it and I want to be able to use it forever, everywhere in the world, etc. So before I did this, I did npm I express, and that loaded it into my project. I think everybody gets that. But what I could have done is I could have said npm -s express. And if I do that, I'm not going to hit enter. But if I did that, what it would do is it would grab that particular package and it would put it literally onto my hard drive. So I'd be able to use it in any project. The recommendation is you never do that. It's something you can do, but virtually nobody does do. All right. All right, probably a lot more than you needed on that, but just so at least you've seen it. All right. So they have a similar thing in here with the HTTP module. There's nothing wrong with these, but the way they're showing this stuff is probably very rarely, if ever, going to be the way you're going to use it. That's why I'm not spending a lot of time on it. All right? You got to realize, again, that this is a client-side book, and they're trying to explain a server-side topic in a client-side book. So the examples they give are still very oriented towards client-side as opposed to a server-side example. All right. So they explain more about the package.json here. All right, and that's it. Now, just before we finish this up, again, this thing that's right here, all right, in fact, I'm going to show it to you this way, so let's see. All right, this is where it is, and this is what I sent you, so I'm just going to quickly go over what I sent you. It's Brad Traversy's. Now, notice it's a little dated. It's almost 3 years old. All right, February of 2019. All right, and Traversy puts out really good stuff, but let's face it, you know, he puts out tons of stuff all the time, and tons of it is free. But he doesn't always turn things around right away. He probably could have another crash course in this. All right, I know that the React, he did a new one this year. All right, so you've got that if you're interested. And what he does is he goes through what Node is. All right, I've already mentioned all this stuff to you. All right, and he says, what should you know first? Well, this is what this class has been about. Now, the only thing that really is in here that we haven't really talked about at all is the MVC pattern. And MVC is Model View Controller. Do you have to worry about that? Just remember it this way. The model is your data. All right, typically when you do a Node project, you've got a folder that's called models. And that's where you set up your database structure. All right? View is what the end user sees. All right? Those are HTML types of files, CSS files, image files, etc. All right? And the C is the controller. They allow the model and the view to talk to one another. They're kind of a supervisor. Some books call them a traffic cop. All right? So why do you use this? The second thing that's in here is the big thing. It's event-driven and it's non-blocking. It literally can handle, I would say, millions of connections at one time. All right? And what it does is it's just like, it's just very highly regulated, and it's highly and very well set up. It says, oh, you do this? Okay, you got to wait for a couple minutes? Okay, I'm going to put you right here. I'm going to put you off to the side, and I'm going to go do something else. All right? And that's pretty much is what's happening in here. And again, the same language on the front end and the back end. And I will tell you that one good thing about this program, and this program is not unique in this way, but one good thing about it is when you leave here, you've got both front end and back end knowledge. And there are a lot of places out there that are looking for people who can be front end / back end developers. All right. Again, it's non-blocking. There's just one thread, and it's constantly bringing things in and out as it needs to. All right. Most other things are multi-threaded. You say, well, that's better. It's multi-threaded. Yeah, but they only have a certain number of threads. So when you reach them, it has to stop and wait for one of the things that's working with a thread. Well, that's not how this works. It just says, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. Oh, there's something this is going to take. I got to go to a database. Well, I'm going to put it away. Now I'm going to go do something else. All right? And they're showing it here. This isn't the greatest picture, but that's exactly what's happening is what I just mentioned to you. All right. So there, again, you don't do it for anything that's CPU intensive. Okay? So if there's a lot of intricate calculations, all right? So if I was going to write a program that was going to figure out how we were going to, let's just say, get to Mars, all right, and colonize Mars, I probably wouldn't use Node for it because there'd probably be a lot of intense calculations that would have to take place. What we use it for more than anything else is we build REST APIs, and REST APIs basically allow you to go in and perform CRUD operations. CRUD, create things, read things, update things, and delete things. All right? All right. And we talked a little bit about NPM and what that is. I showed you a couple of these in here. All right. So with Node, as it says, you can bring in your own stuff, and you can bring in existing stuff. I mentioned that to you. All right, so that's what they had in that one. Not, like I said, not real much. All right. Then in the Node Package Manager stuff, that's where that is. Notice that's even older. All right, so that's 4 years plus old. All right, it's not like that's really changed a lot, though. All right. Again, when you install Node, you get that for free. We already talked about that, okay? All right, modules, as it says, they're basically JavaScript libraries. And if you remember, and at least one of you in here used a library on the last test. But we did look at that, and in the guise of using that miles per gallon program, they showed that in your book, how to use a library. Again, makes it easy for developers to share and reuse code. Yeah. So if you follow, I think this one was about an hour long. This is what he teaches you. So what he shows you in the first one is he shows you Node. And that's pretty long. It's an hour and a half. I've watched it a couple times. It's good. The problem is what he shows you with Node is he says, okay, I'm going to show you how to do this. This is about as crude a way as you can do something as possible. And he sets up basically like an entire website, but he does it with just Node. Then he gets done and he goes, no, you'll probably never do that because there's a package called Express, and then in the Express one, which we'll look at in a second, he redoes what he did in the Node one, but he redoes it with Express. And the reason he's doing it with both is some older sites might still be doing it that way, but basically everybody today uses the Express package. All right. So again, what is Express? I showed you that as far as just a little bit in the example, but if you look in here, notice it's middleware. What's middleware? Well, that's stuff that's in the middle. Now, everything that you do when you are working on a website is filled with HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, requests and responses. All right? So in here, you are constantly using a request object and a response object. The request object is what you're pulling in. The response object is what you're sending back. Does that make sense? All right. So this one, again, about 3 years old. Now, it may not seem like a big thing, but it says it's a fast, unopinionated, and minimalist framework. That's actually what you get when you go out to the expressjs.com site. All right? And when they say it's unopinionated, what they mean is there's an unlimited number of ways of doing the same thing. And Express will never tell you which one to use because it's unopinionated. All right? It's minimalist, so it's designed to work with as little bit of code as possible. All right? As it says, it's a back-end framework. All right? It's not comparable to things like React. All right? React is a front end, more a front end framework. All right? So you read that yourselves, but it makes the whole process much more streamlined. That's the big thing about using it. Right? It makes it much easier to use. And as it says, by far it's the most popular. I don't have to go out there, but I know that if I went out to npmjs.com and I typed in Express, that the number of downloads in the last week would be between 5 and 10 million. All right. So you know that it's being used often. All right. Again, what should you know first? It's the same kind of stuff that we talked about earlier. And this is the kind of thing that you do. Now, I don't expect any of this to make sense, but if we put in something like this into that server.js file that I showed you before, and we ran it, what that would do is it would say that if we went out to port 5000, we should get a message that says hello world. Now, is that a big thing? No. But notice all we're doing is we're sending that back. Instead of sending that back, we could send entire web pages back. And we could go in and create our own site. I don't know, I don't think it'll let me copy this. Yeah, I don't feel like typing. But if I put that in, that's exactly what you'd see. All right? All right. And as it says, it does a lot of different stuff. These are the CRUD operations. You can do gets, which retrieves information, posts, which basically allows you to enter in information, puts, which allows you to change existing information, and deletes, which allows you to remove existing information. All right? And there's more to it than that. So again, this is what I just shown you before. It's middleware. You can also write your own middleware. All right? And that's pretty much it. All right? So again, the rest of the period today will be lab. Tomorrow will be lab. On Monday when you come in, you guys can do it, but you don't have to because you won't need it for anything. But there's a new version of Visual Studio that's just coming out right now, and it's Visual Studio 2022, which is something because, you know, back in like 2019 we were using 2017. In 2021 we were using 19. So you're going to get the latest and the greatest. So we're going to do that, and then I'm going to show you guys how to download on Tuesday a couple of Java products. All right? All right, so that's all that I've got.